If you want to successfully run a sports coaching business in 2025, you need to have the right model to do it. After helping 200 plus sports coaches achieve revenue markers as high as $100,000 a month, I know what works and what doesn't. Today, I'm gonna break down each route you can take and the numbers behind each one. So in-person coaching is the traditional model of training one athlete one time per week, and you're typically looking at training athletes on the hour, or every half hour. So let's break down what the numbers actually look like for in-person coaching specifically. Now, hours worked and number of athletes is going to depend on what your individual goals are as a coach. However, for most of you guys, if you're training high school or middle school aged athletes and you're gonna work from, let's say, 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. or 9 p.m., you realistically can only work about 25 to 30 hours per week inside the cage where you can actually make money. However, we do need to factor in, the time that we are spending driving to the facility, scheduling with parents, answering questions to your athletes, and all of that we're not actually getting paid for. Okay, so it's probably pretty fair to assume that, let's say we were to work 30 hours, we can multiply that by 1.5 because you're probably spending another 15 doing all the other bullshit that comes with in-person training. So that would be what? Let's say 45 hours per week that we're working on in-person coaching, okay? So if we're gonna work 30 hours and let's say you're a decent coach and you're training, 1 hour per athlete, you very simply can only work with about 30 athletes, okay? And so this is probably, this is pretty good for, what you see the typical in-person sports coach. They're probably working somewhere around 45 hours. They're working with about 30 athletes. And realistically, you could probably only charge about 75 to 100 bucks an hour. Some areas you can charge way more than that, but that's typically what we're looking at, okay? But we have to remember that, let's say we're charging $100 an hour. You and I both know that this is not what you are walking with, okay? You're going to have to probably pay a facility fee and the gas and all this other different bullshit that's actually coming with being an in-person sports coach. So let's say that the facility takes maybe 20% if you're lucky. Maybe some of you guys, they're taking 30%. So let's just say, to be fair, $75 per hour, okay? And let's say you're making $100 an hour and you're training 30 athletes per week. I mean, shit, that looks great. You're making about 3K a week, but realistically, how often is your schedule full with 30 athletes per week? It's probably pretty rare. And then on top of that, you have to give a facility fee, and this is not including, right, the actual gas that you're paying and all this different other expenses and things like that. But if we're just gonna look at it in this way, okay, let's say each athlete is going to pay us, I don't know, $250 per month because some are gonna come more, some are gonna come less. We're gonna multiply that by 30. Now, what does that math actually look like? It's about $7,500 per month. And this is an absolute best case scenario for most of you guys. Most of you guys, if you have 30 athletes, you're probably not walking with $7,500 per month because you don't have the right model. Okay, so let's go into the exact opposite of in-person training. Let's go strictly online. Now, the online training model is, as you'll see, going to be much more profitable, but let me prove it to you with the numbers, okay? Let's say we're gonna take the exact same number of athletes that we're working with, 30, okay? If you've never trained anybody online before, the math per athlete, right? How much time you're spending per athlete per week is probably gonna be somewhere around 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, realistically. Let's even overestimate and say it's 20 minutes per athlete. That's really only going to be about 10 hours per week of work actually fulfilling on your athletes, okay? So as you can see right here, you're working about 35 hours a week less. You're not driving here, you're not going to the facility, and the best part about it, let's say you're gonna get about $400 per month per athlete. Well, we see we're working 10 hours per week to make, let's say, $12,000 per month. Okay, so with the online model, we are working 35 hours less, right? We're making more per athlete, and we're almost doubling our income on a best case scenario here on in-person. And this number right here, $400 per month, is honestly a little bit conservative. I have clients that are charging $800, $900 per month for their online training program. So the possibilities are pretty much endless, and realistically, the number of athletes that you can work with is actually uncapped. And so because the number of athletes that you're working with is actually uncapped, there's never gonna be an income cap here. Okay, you can take it as far as you want. If you only want to work 10 hours a week, that's fine. But for those of you guys that actually want to blow your shit up, imagine if you were to work 45 hours a week, okay, on your online training business. Then all we would need to do is 3.5x all these numbers. What does that end up becoming? Like 110 athletes per month online, $400 a month. You could do the math there. If you don't want to, it's about 44 grand a month for the same amount of time that you're training in person. So if you don't think that online is better than in person in terms of a business model, then you're actually just fucking terrible at math. But let's jump into hybrid next. So let's dive into the third option here, which is hybrid. And so hybrid, let's just assume we have the same number of athletes here just for the purpose of the entire example. And then we'll talk about what the possibilities are after, okay? So let's say we have 30 athletes on a hybrid model, just to assume the exact same. Okay, and the benefit of the hybrid model is you actually can charge about $400 per month to see your athletes about half as much as you're seeing them in person. So let's just say for this example that for 30 athletes, you're gonna work about, let's even go on the high side, okay, and go 25 hours per week. And that's honestly being a little bit estimating on what you're actually going to spend with this. But we have to remember that with a hybrid model, we're still training in person, and plenty of coaches out there don't want to give up their in-person training entirely, which totally understand. That's why you got into coaching, okay? So with the hybrid model, let's say you're gonna have about 25 hours per week, you're gonna probably charge about $400 and maybe even $500 per month per athlete, okay? And so depending on what you charge, depending on the services that you provide, different things like that, you know, we could do the math pretty simply and say that it's about somewhere between $12,000 to $15,000 per month, okay? Now, the biggest difference between the hybrid model and the online model is the online doesn't really have a cap on how many athletes you can train because of the scalability of the model, whereas the hybrid, you are limited with the amount of hours that you can work, but you're gonna make way more fucking money per athlete, okay? So if you're just doing in-person training, like all you have to do is add a hybrid component right here, and you're gonna double the amount of money that you make, and you're gonna cut your working hours almost in half, and probably in half. That's me overestimating how much you're actually going to work, okay? But the real winner, if you really want to scale, if you really want to make the most amount of money for the least amount of your time, I mean, like, let's not be stupid here. It's online. The math clearly proves it. So if you're wondering which one of these you should pursue, then I'm not gonna lie to you, not everybody is cut out for strictly online, and not everybody is cut out for strictly hybrid. So let me give you some examples of who should pursue online only and who should pursue hybrid only, because at the end of the day, if you're only gonna do in-person only, then we've already established that you're just fucking terrible at math. So assuming that you're not terrible at math and you actually have a 7th grade education, then pay attention, because I'm gonna tell you which one of these models you should pursue, okay? So if you are, let's say, 22, 25, 27 years old, you have high-level playing experience, you're pretty decent with social media, but you don't have an in-person roster already, then online is your way to go. The reason why is because hybrid relies heavily on your in-person athlete roster that you already currently have. So we can just assume that if you don't already have an in-person roster, then you can't make hybrid work, okay? I hopefully don't need to explain that any further. Now, when it comes to hybrid, if you have an in-person roster already, then at minimum, you should be leveraging hybrid unless you wanna get out of in-person training entirely, in which case you should use your hybrid to then build to go online strictly. So for some context, okay? I have a coach that I'm working with currently right now. He's a professional baseball player working in Europe, and he makes about $10,000 per month strictly from his online program, but he didn't start there, okay? He came to me and he didn't know how exactly he could navigate this. So what we did was we launched his hybrid program because he had some credibility in his local area. He started generating some clients with hybrid. And then when he got this job to go play overseas, he transitioned all of his hybrid clients into an online model. And while he was building his hybrid program, he was building his social media presence. So that way he started landing strictly online clients, used the hybrid to feed the online, and now he's making $10,000 a month playing baseball in Europe. So if you are somebody who wants to go strictly online. I have clients like Anthony, who makes about $25,000 a month every single month, used to give in-person lessons, or AJ, for example. He's actually a current school teacher. Shout out to AJ. The birth of his firstborn son was yesterday, and he makes about $15,000 a month as a school teacher, training athletes online. As you can see, people like that need to leverage online because they don't have as much time in person. Now, a client that I've worked with, Carl had a huge in-person athlete roster, leveraged the hybrid model. He doesn't really do anything strictly online. He leveraged the hybrid model and added an extra $75,000 in revenue in just 90 days by strictly using the hybrid model because he had this gigantic wait list. So if you're watching this right now and you want to know which one of these that you should pursue, number one, you shouldn't fucking do this at all, right? If you want to make the most amount of money for the least amount of your time, you should leverage online as much as you possibly can. If you have a huge in-person athlete roster and you don't really want to rely on social media marketing to go get more and more and more people, then you should pursue the hybrid model. But with that being said, you shouldn't only be doing in-person training in 2025. That's the dumbest shit you could possibly do. So as you can see, it's proven time and time again that online and hybrid are superior business models to in-person. Now, if you want to learn exactly how to implement this into your business step by step, I have a program, Remote Training University, where I've taught 200 plus sports coaches how to do just that. I'll be honest, it does take work, but with the guidance of our team and our hand-holding and our one-on-one support, I can absolutely guarantee that you will have all the information, support, and resources you need to succeed. So if that sounds any bit interesting, check out the link in the description. But regardless, appreciate you watching. Catch you in the next one.